Yes, first of all, I will begin with introduction, and I want to introduce myself. I am Maris. I am working for software developer about 12 years. I was working with PHP, was working with Java, currently working in Java, and example will be in Java. So in my presentation, there is less text, and mostly the text I will say, it will be written on the screen, and there will be huge amount of code snippets inside it, yes, and all code snippets are black. And if you see that there is some white space between them, those are different classes, different objects, or something like that. Yes, so first question to all, can anyone hear me, or there's problems? Okay, yes, then let's start with the presentation. So how to use Solid in full stack development, what is Solid principles, and how we can use them in project engineering of web pages. This is a question that I ask every time I read any Solid example, and what is Solid and something like that. Yes, I see some simple examples, but I can't really understand how those examples tells me how I can implement it in my project. Yes, I see what it is, I see how to use it, but when it comes to web pages, yes, I start to ask, there is some circle, let's say circle, triangle, and round, yes, and I don't understand how I can adjust it to web page, and I started to think and understood that let's say, yeah, everything I read about Solid is just an article what it is, and not a single article how I can use it. So I created a request to present how I would recommend to use Solid principles inside the project. So yes, first of all, I will explain how it will look. Yes, I created some simple project, and after I will solidify it and improve by showing why Solid principles are good. And project is very, very simple. Project contains only one form for login, and main goal of the project is to solidify it and add form for registration. Yes, just more fields, just a different form, just a switch between forms, yes, and it will present how easy it is when project is solid. So Solid is always welcome, is not a pattern, it is principle and should be treated like a principle. So what it means? It means that if you are using Solid, you should understand why you are doing this. Yes, if you are using patterns, you should understand goals that you should reach. So Solid is very time-consuming thing, but it can give you very much in case you invest in it. Yes, if you doesn't invest in it, then time spending on the project improvements will grow. If you are using Solid principles, then time consuming of implementing new things will just stay on the one place. If you made first project in 1 day, then second improvement will be 1 day, and 100 improvement will be 1 day. So if in case you are working from the start, then first improvement will be 1 hour, then 2 hours, then 3 hours, 4 hours, and then 100 improvement will be 100 hours. So if you think that project will be large, then you can start to implement Solid principles in order to maintain the project and get a profit from it. So using Solid is not about following a rule, it's about engineering and planning. Yes. So I will show and explain everything, and it's first recommendation to start using Solid, write simple code, not large, and after just start analyzing what belongs to what. And when you start to understand what belongs to what, you can start to split those things in separated objects, let's say templates, and pin up separated templates with separated objects, and get some huge, let's say, architecture that can be swifted, and elements can be replaced and easily, let's say, Not all code followed by all rules will be better. Rules should be review it, and use it only when they give profit. Almost any code can rework to solid. It just should be done step by step. Yes. So if you think that your project is 10,000 lines single method, then you can't rework it to solid, yes. But it will cost you much more efforts because you will need to split out from the huge chunk of code some structured things and separate them from this huge chunk. Yes, and you can move one line to the one method, interface, whatever, and you can start using it by one, and in some time you can finish it. Yes, so what is solid? Who don't know what is solid and what principles each letter represents everything. So everyone knows. Yes, so I just wrote it. I won't read it. Yes, I hope you every one of you know it. So. Solid goals: make code simpler, make code reusable, make code flexible, make code structured, make code more readable, make code improvable. Yes. For many things, many people who doesn't work solid, they will say why 20,000 of classes is more readable. Yes, but I can explain one thing. If you have 20,000 classes, it is better than you have 20,000 lines in one file. This is much better because you can brainly separate each object from the chunk of, you can create some structure and create some, let's say, mapping between objects. If you have 20,000 lines, you can't create mapping because it's like a book. Yes, you need to know every line to understand what is going under the meats. So, presentation goals. Yes, when implement solid features, I explained if you think that project will be large and the efforts to solidify code is very good, then you should use. If you think that you don't need to, for example, request is single and your project manager never comes in, you just make some code, yes, and if in case of many requests, you can rework to solid it at every time. Only thing to recommend to do always is use S letter, yes, single responsibility. Why? Because if you use single responsibilities, then splitting all the code into separated interfaces will be much easier. Yes, you will, let's say, don't have any problems to write interfaces and rewrite the methods. Visualize the results, explain code refactoring choices. Yes, this is what I will do. So first of all, we have what we should reach. So we have login form that have login and password, and all it is do when you push the button login, it is encoding it in JSON values and base encoding password and showing on the screen. That is all. Yes, main goal of this presentation is to implement repeat password field, name converted full name, surname, and use solid approach to reach the results. Yes, and project will be simple. Here is all the project we have. Yes, those are all the lines from the project. So first of all, I will, let's say, okay. First of all, this is all the code that project have. I am using Spring Boot, so all the web underneath it is hidden. Yes, and there won't be any additional, let's say, yes, hacks and something like that. And yes, if everyone can understand Java, yes, then lecture will be at least good. So now we have simple application that is working. In order to reach flexibility and implement multiple forms, we need to make code solid. Before we continue, let's repeat goals. Our goals is to make multiple forms with multiple data handling. One is let's name into login forms that we have already. Second will be let's name it register forms that we need to implement additionally. In order to do so, we need to analyze existing code for splitting it in logical reusable segments. Yes. First of all, we come to the output. Yes, if we see something, then we should make first output. Yes, we are analyzing what we have there and what we need to do. So we should find dynamic elements from inputs and split them to separated file in order to reuse them. Single reusable element for input will look like next image. So yes, I took from above image one input, moved the bottom, finds variable names. Yes, for example, this is twig styling. I didn't use any twig library. It is used manually by replace functionality. Yes, in twig you can just keep replacing and using twig engine in order to replace the variables. So in this case, I separated the inputs from the whole HTML context. Yes, in order to apply new elements, we should add place where we will generate them. So next we reworked form to place on a twig, let's say, placeholder where we will place generated inputs by our code. So please notice that we use the twig variable snippets like input for implementing dynamic elements. Yes. We need to implement two forms which we switch between them. So we need add new elements, buttons for switch. Yes. So we created some div menu, nav item, and we created action to switch between forms. Yes. So we have pointed the place where we have where we will generate nav items, and we pointed place to replace actions to understand where we push the results from the form. As nav item will be from listing item, action will lead to current form, target to understand where nav item is submitted results. Yes. Next we will adapt our JavaScript code. Yes. So we take action from attr, let's say form action, and push it at URL instead of static. Yes. So this first dynamic element we add. So we understood that we will use URL parameter to explain which form we will choose, and we will just push from the existing form action attribute. Yes. So this is example of how we looked first page. Yes, and how we will implement second page. We need to review first step in our code, that is controller. We need to implement review with demand link into next actions. Yes, so we created index and index with ID. Yes, in further screenshots I reworked first index to redirect to second one. Yes, and in this case I use default value and after the detection of the primary form. Yes, so. We have single file read where we should adjust it into new format with partial file filling. So we need this file to take new partial HTML and rework logic to solid in order to replace new parameters. So what we have one file reading. It is static. It is not dynamic, and we should rework to multiple files. Yes, for input with single file, for nav item second file, and for index HTML there will be third file. So first thing we should do, to do so we need to remember that we have two template types visible right now. One is primary template content and second input template content. We have two abstraction levels, so same we will need solid interface levels. Yes, so we have two abstraction levels. One abstraction level is parameter for inputs, and second abstraction level is parameter for forms, where we generated inputs. So there are two abstraction levels, and we should create at least two interfaces separate. Yes, for each abstraction level. We need a container that will store data what we replace. For example, we need label, email address. So we need container to store data what we will replace on what. Yes. So we created some items. This is let's say not fully solid item because we don't use interface. We use a single object for all variables. Yes, it have what to replace and on what to replace. So this is not solid item, but it is very common practice to, let's say, doesn't use solid when we doesn't need it. Yes, we could make solid and create 20 files with implementing interface. We can create one object and reuse it more. Yes, so just to understand where we don't, where we can dynamically reuse one object, we should use one object, not to crash into solid and make more objects. So as remember, we have multiple items in single form file, so we should have more than one container for one single replacement. Yes, so we created one item. Here we need 3 items, and for that we will need a collection. To produce collection, we should create an interface. Why we can create, we can keep the list or we can create interface. This choice is, let's say, better to create interface, yes, because interface you can extend with additional logic. You can implement their additional handlers, for example, data searcher, or for example, data replacer, data validator, or something like that, and you can implement above the current interface level and implement validation without changing the object's content. Yes, you can just create new interface, extend on existing, implement the interface on the existing objects where you need validation, and pass those, make interface watch, for example. If it is instance of validating interface, we go validate. If not, we don't go validate. Yes, so in this case, better to create a collection, even if this collection is not doing anything. Yes, also this collection can find items or, let's say, loop the items. Yes, so there is placeholder for additional logic. Yes. Next, we can create some abstraction for input, as we can count for how much fields we will need in HTML and make create class. So we need single input interface, and I just pushed the fields of HTML files to interface, just to explain which variables I can use for input replacing values. Yes, and now when we have clear picture what and how we need, we must forward to next automatic generation item link. Yes, first we create HTML template. This is simple link, href. Yes, after I will add some styling to bootstrap the buttons, but it's start. Next, we create interface with replacing values, single nav interface. Yes, and we, as same as with inputs, we just point the fields we can replace in this HTML template. So one template, one interface, just in order to understand which values we have in the HTML template, in order to backend developer doesn't ask how to read frontend. He will just see the input and interface and understand which variables he need to implement. Now when we have input item and now item, we can start thinking how to unite them under one interface in order to get collection of replacing items. Yes, so currently we have input and link implementations. Yes, in order to unite them, we need we need to find how we can rework them to collection. In order to do so, we will need an additional interface that will give this collection and implement in both items. Yes. So we need to understand how upper two interfaces we can use, implement in bottom single interface. Yes, for this we'll need at least one converter, because fields are different, names are different, and we should keep solid, so both of inputs will be forced to become the bottom one. So in this case, we will need to create additional interface. Yes, and Here we can see that we created additional content replacing collection interface. Yes, and okay, I got lost. Okay, first, why we need separate interface? First answer is to reduce repeat logic. We have first option, create abstraction class. This is not solid approach. Second, create interface and handler for separated of each items, getting one interface another. So let's move on. So I created a collection. This collection contains content replacer items. Content replacer items, those are simple items that we use to replace single twig tag. Yes. Here we have created one, and let's move to handler. Yes. Next, we create handlers for input. Those are just converters that is converting from the input into list of content replacer items in order to say what we replaced on what. Yes, those converters are common thing in solid approach, because many times you need 20 different objects to become a single structure in order to reuse every logic you have implemented in the project. Yes, so in this case it just takes constructor and assigns incoming input into variable. After you request replacing items, it will return the replacing items into response. Yes, so we can create nav items, we can create input items, we can create, for example, styling items, we can create some additional, let's say, output items or something like that. And by this approach, we won't need to edit existing code. We just add new class, describe which fields we use to create content replacers, and after that we will have very reusable logic that will collections that we will pass into our handler, and this handler will use them in order to replace content. So next, now we can create first inputs, emails and password. Yes. So this is just let's say example for on existing form. Yes, we just implement two new objects. We just implement get label, get type, get name. Why we created separated objects instead of passing strings to some magic objects? And yes, why we need two objects of email and password input. That's why we need for each field each input, because we have 20,000 forms, for example, and in those 20,000 forms we can have 20 times visible email input, yes, and 10 times visible password input, for example, yes. And so we need to specify by code each input we can introduce into our forms. Yes, so if we will have 20 different logical inputs, then we will create 20 different logical objects by implementing single input interface. And before that, we extend content replacer collection container interface just to convert current object into collection. Yes, in order to automatically replace content with handlers. So next we will need to create form. First we should understand what form we'll have. First thing is one from contains multiple inputs, so it's an input collection. Let's create interface. Yes, so we create web form interface, and we extend existing single nav interface in order to explain that the web form have navigation. So we will use same object for navigation generation and input generation. And we split to different interfaces because logic are not related each to other. You can separately generate links, and you can separately handle the form. Yes, and those two cases are very, very different, and you can use form only for navigation generation and never use it for example logic input providing. Yes, so you can just use part of the logic. So in the bottom parts there is just showing what it is extending in order to understand what is full collection of the interface. Yes, and from the right side is a place where we will place those forms. Yes, now item and action. Action will be get ID and action will be get label. Get label will be same as get ID. Why I used get label and get ID if the value will be always the same? Because we pass it in action and we are searching the form from passed parameter in action. Yes, so this parameter 100% should be the same. It's just naming because sometimes users, developers, let's say, yes, not users. User doesn't see. Sometimes the developers doesn't understand what means label. Yes, if I place it at start using it as form ID, he will be confused. What to use, link or label? Yes, what of this means form? So I created get ID because it is in development common thing that ID is unique and you can't create multiple forms with same ID, and developer will understand that this will be correct parameter to search form inside the collection. Yes. So in this case, nav contained replacement collection. Yes, this is again let's say getter for our handlers that we will review afterwards. Yes, it's about now we have everything to create login form object. Yes, this how will look any form. You can generate such forms about 20,000 and it will work. Yes, because you can construct any kind of inputs and every different, let's say, sequency, and those forms will be generated. So those forms will look differently. Yes, and even if you will, let's say, implement additional logic, then we can even add different validation on different objects. Yes, and from the left side we can see the code, how form is looking, and from the right side it will be output that will be generated by the left form. Yes, so left form will generate right output if we create proper handler. And let's analyze our method and reworked solid approach. Here we see get home page, it reads one file. Now we have multiple files, yes, index, input, and nav. So now we need file helper to reduce repeat code. File helper just created file helper to read files by smaller, let's say, smaller code. Yes, we need file helper dot get file contents and relative path to the file from the resource folder. This is Java thing, and yes. So next now let's move forward. We created the file replacer. In next slide probably we'll implement it and use. Now let's move forward to service and start creating its structures. Yes. So we now have index HTML from the top, and it is just three variables, submit button that is not dynamic, and from the bottom is response content that is just static. Yes, where I place response content after I place login or what send button. Yes. So we need some interfaces to replace in content. So get replacing content generated index, get replacing index. Yes, this get replacing index is just to specify that element of this interface contains replaceable part in first part of form. So we have two abstraction levels: first abstraction level and second. So the content generation index interface is just to replace first abstraction level twig index. Then we need HTML content for replacing. Yes, we need to read files from the separated small files. So we need interface to understand that this input have stored HTML code anywhere. It may be string variable, it may be file. It doesn't, let's say, it doesn't. It isn't important right now. Yes, it will be important when we will create classes for it. Also, we have multiple inputs and now items, so we need some collection for replacement. Yes. So we need to get collection items by form ID. So we need to find, for example, all inputs for form 1 or form 2. So for this, we need additional method that is get collection items by passing form ID. Content replace containing interface, this is just to generate a nav item from the top. Yes, as we will have, let's say each form will have its own nav item with 2 different fields. So in this case, we need some method to return those fields values. Yes, and those 4 interfaces are separated. They are not combined together. In order to create form, we create interface with 4 extents. So we don't use we don't use one interface, we use 4 extents. Why? Because each of representing interface is responsible for separated logic. For example, get HTML content will read some files content. Get replacing index will return some index to replace the file with file content. Adjust content will replace existing content with our twig index. Yes, so it will be visible afterwards. But connection container will return items to replace in nav item HTML file indexes. Yes, and those methods are very separated and they are very different, and they will have their own handlers. First will be action content adjuster, as it doesn't require complex logic and we will be easy to understand. Yes, adjust content, action replacer service implements adjust content interface. It's just replace actions to the form ID. Simple as that. Yes, so we now can in first abstraction replace action to form ID. So we have prepared submit target. Yes, this will prepare and automatically detect which form will have which submit target. Now I think we are prepared to move from planning to creating logic and create first service for input generation. Here we can see we implemented abstraction, yes, and it implements content generation interface. The content generation interface is combined from 4 different interfaces, and we can reuse it as any child interface. Yes, so if we create handler to replace, for example, nav items, we will point interface for replacing nav items. Yes, or something like that. Maybe in this code it doesn't use always. Yes, okay. It's not as logic of content will be common for all services. I move it to abstraction. Analyze next slide. Yes, and abstraction and generation service will have method replace content. For 2 different types of elements, I will have same logic, because so I move it to abstraction to reduce duplicated logic. Yes, but anyway, there is fourth method that will take HTML content and pass to the replacing index input the HTML content formatted by content replacing collection interface list. Yes, and it will, let's say, do the tricks. It will be more visible in the logic. Maybe not here, yes. No, there will be. So first of all, we have multi-form collection and multi-form collection, we have created only one form, login web form. So we are currently reworking existing code to solid approach. We are not creating a super cool thing with two forms already. So we are existing form, recreating to solid. Multi-form collection looks something like this. Yes, we have constructor where we add all possible forms. Currently, first form. We have get selecting field collection from by form ID. Yes, I could separate it to interface and it will be more solidified. Yes, but I doesn't do that. Doesn't understand why, but it's not here. So it is not interface as we need. No need multiple. Okay. There is reason. Yes, we don't need multi-form collections because we have only one collection for all the project. If we would need about 20 collections for different, for example, hosts, yes, 20 different hosts will have 200 different collections or forms split between them. Then we will need interface. Here we don't need multiple form collections, so we don't need interface and we don't need to implement it. We can continue without it and adjust it in case we need multiple hosts with multiple different form collections. Yes, we can just split it into interfaces and review what we need in order to make split by some additional logic. Now, multi-nav item generation service. Yes, this is the same as input, almost the same. Yes, only difference is template split nav file and get replacing index is not nav item. So placeholders are different, nav item are different, yes, and get collection items is mapping nav get content replace collection and collect as list. It just calls on all objects inside the collection, get contains replacer collection and returns it as list. Yes, if someone doesn't know how it works, stream map function is collector list. Yes, we create item and nav items. First, let's adjust content method. Okay. First is now we need to create common action for replacing multiple items by previous shown data. I will show two complex methods. Logic helper to replace items by interface. Logic helper is just to replace every content replacing item inside anything. Yes, for example, it's okay. It's just a single method in order to replace collection for the input. Yes, so instead of foring two cycles, I just move it logic helper. I could move it to the separated method, but it will be less reusable. So I just decided to create logic helper and move for cycle out of the other for cycle to make it more readable. Yes, I could also create this method in separate method in order to make both four cycles contain only one line. Then in this case, code will be much more understandable. And after the replacing of any item inside content generation interface, it is for forms and it is for navigation items. Both are using the same logic. Yes. So after we replace every single item with our collection existing items, we reduce replacing index to empty space to not show it on the screen. Yes, so first we replace all items from collection. Second, we replace placeholder to empty space in order to delete it from the form. Visible content. Now we can create rendering service to render full output. Yes, and now we can see that we have multi-form rendering service, generate our lists, and we are implementing free services. I'm not sure why I implement as services. Yes, they could be just static objects by created. Yes, but here we can use dependency injection. Yes, and this is a rendering service for first abstraction level. So we have three different three with different placeholders. So three different placeholders will have three different generation services. Yes. So get content is simple. It takes indexes. It takes every interface of previously created action in placeholder replacer, nav item placeholder replacer, and input placeholder replacer, and just call adjust content on all of them. Yes, so we can create, for example, ending result container and make it dynamic. Yes, we can create an adjuster for the ending result and extend our object and add more replacing items to first level of abstraction. Previous class was second level of abstraction. So this was working with second level of abstraction in nav item and in input item. So if we will have third item that will be complex, it can look like this one, yes, and in this case, it could be, for example, get replacing index replacer from nav item to, I don't know, response content item, yes, and we can replace file and collection can have multiple response, for example, success response, error response, or something like that, and those containers will be implemented inside the inside the final form. So next steps is to make controllers and watch what we will have to end in the end. So this as I mentioned before, yes, I reworked first method into redirect view in order to always have action. Yes, so if you come to the host without ID, it redirects to element with ID. And in this case, we can see in controller which default form is. If user comes to our website, yes, there won't be any v2, there will be slash, and the v2 is just created for this example. Yes, and the bottom, these are the results. So what we have reached by our rendering service. Send button is not working because we doesn't implement logic, but login form is displaying, and login form link is above the email address. Yes, we can see. Good solid environment is created for HTML generation. Now we can choose what to do next. Implement second form registration form or implement solid form submitting logic. Yes, so now we have visualization of existing inputs. So we created the first submitting data prepared form, and now we can choose the direction. Or we are creating logic behind send button, or we are creating second form from the top. Both cases will consume same time amount. This is just I will show how we can add new form in order to show how easy it is to use solid environment. So let's find next steps, create input object for new 3 fields. So we are creating first name input, password, repeat input, and last name input. Yes, so those are 3 new objects that we can add into any form that we are creating. This override method can be replaced to abstraction. Yes, it can be replaced to solid service separated and pass this input to find solutions to helper or whatever. Yes, this is not must have item. Yes, I just implemented it to visualize how content replace and collection is generated. Yes, to see it in each object. So now we have everything to create new form. If you notice that getLink method returns result of getIDs, you may ask why. Just to keep good value naming with same values as ID we use for getting item from collection list and pass as link into action. Yes, so getID returns form ID, getLink returns getID. So when we are replacing nav item, we use getLink. When we are searching for form, we use getID. Here we can see that this is same value. Yes, and just is naming in order to understand. After, at the top, we can see direction how the form inputs will be generated. Yes, and we can remove any input from here or add any new input here, and form will be adjusted like it need. Yes, bottom side almost will be the same. with different values. Yes. Now let's look what we have in the end. So after we made the form with selection option, we need some improvements, add navigation signals where we are, and make better readability of link items to save some time. I will use front end here. Yes, as you see, login and register is chunked up because I don't use styling. I just place two href items behind them. But you can see that the form is generated with different fields, and all we need is create this class. That's all. In order to create new form with new inputs, we need to create third form and add to collection. That's all. Yes. I skipped the place where I am adding second form to the collection. Yes. Okay. We update HTML to add styling. So we just add nav button and Next.js lines in order to just use Bootstrap for current navigation. And yes, here I just use a single responsibility in JavaScript in order to make code be a bit more readable. Yes, because each method have namings and each method have logic. Yes, and this logic is separated from previous logic that is sending Ajax form to submit. So this logic is not related to form submitting, so it's more or less single responsibility. Yes, now we need to implement, and yes, and if you are creating some new functionality, don't be scared to use multiple onload handlers. It's better to create 20 onload handlers than one onload handler with 20 functionality inside this, because you can't abstract your current choice into other, let's say, you will start to think how it relates to other items that is handling before onload event. Now we need to implement logic. Currently we implemented visual part, but we have also logical, so we will need to create actions for preparing data according to requirements. First, we need to analyze existing source code and split into parts. So I will speed up because time is going. I can split this code to 3 parts: serializing logic, listing items, and handling each item separately. Yes. In this, I have only one method where all the logic is going on. Yes, this is first form. I showed in first slide with code. You could see this method. Now we will analyze and we will see that we have response preparing. Yes, replace all something. Yes, we have object mapper that will, let's say, decode the incoming request into objects. List form detail. Form detail is just object with 2 fields. Yes, and after we are switching, we are listing form detail items and handling logic inside for cycle. Let's begin with data interfaces. So we need to create interface for the resulting object. Yes. We need to unite 2 fields into one, so we need to rename them and we need target field. So for example, in our forms, we have first name and second name, and those both names should result as full name. Yes, so in this case, I need target field name, and I pushed upper on the interface constant how it will be named combined variable. Also, we need to prepare values for response. I created constant to unite 2 fields into single editing name as interface constant. Yes. As I mentioned previously, we need response object. Why we need it? To explain serial the response items. Yes, we created response item name value. That's all. I won't use some complex, let's say, logic from the serializer. Yes, the object mapper. I just created an interface to explain each item we will have in response. Now we can create serializer interface as we have everything to explain the output and input data. We have serializer interface, serialized data, deserialized data. One is preparing from incoming request list of objects. Second is preparing from outcome objects into string data in order to pass it to the front end. Yes, and this serialized input can be replaced to any XML format, JSON format, even some comma format, maybe SQL format, or any other format. If we have interface, we need to create an object for this interface. Is this fully solid? Yes. And JSON serialized data, deserialized data. Raise a hand if someone will say that this is 100% solid object. Okay, no one is, let's say, no, you are right. This is not fully solid object because I created interface for both methods. In order to be fully solid, interface should be separated by each method. Yes, and extended serialize interface should extend serialize interface and deserialize interface. In this case, it would be fully solid because serialization and deserialization, this is different kind of jobs and they are executed at different time of steps. So in this case, in some cases, we don't need solid in order to explain what object can do fully. Yes, just for visibility. It's not a required step. Also should create handler for each input. So email input handler, first name input handler, last name input handler, yes. And this is shown just how the classes will work, yes. And at private final single input, it just means which input it is handling. So it is separated from the input instead of creating logic inside the input. Yes, so we created different handlers that knows which input they are handling in order to keep solid principle, single responsibility. One is responsible for storing form input data. Second is responsible for handling input data. They cannot be united in one object. This will violate single responsibility law. And add password fields. Yes, password input handler and password repeat input handler. So also we need collection in order to find by form DTO which input DTO we need. So yes, so now we will create service for converting single DTO into response item. Notice I didn't make it solid. I don't see reasons as we doesn't need multiple services. Yes, we doesn't need multiple logics on send button, so I created only one service that is handling every logic, yes. So I just saved some time, yes, not more. This can be refactored easily to single responsibility, to solid principles, yeah, but I don't need it because task is not about this. Yes, so handle DTO is handling the logic for each single incoming DTO. DTO is just passing from the existing field name and variable value into DTO, and this is building response item. By building response item, it is calling the get source field's name in order to understand where to place value. Or no, this is just for finding input for handler for input, get source field name. Prepare field value will be placed in value, get target field name will be searched in collection and updated or added the new value from prepare value. Yes. So in top we see that if we don't have in collection item, we add new. In bottom we see if we have item, we get existing item, remove it from collection, prepare and create response. Yes, we create new item by passing existing value. Somewhere here, response item get value. Yes, here we pass existing value in order to adjust case. This case where we have existing value is from the left, and existing value is from the right. Yes, first name, last name. So also I wanted to add validation to handle only forms input to make more stable and predictable. Yes, so in this case we have forms and we have handlers. Handlers can handle every object from input form. Yes, you can, without checking if this form can handle this input, it will can handle any input that is have specified logic. So I decided to create some input detection. Does this form contain this input? Yes, in order to understand maybe wrong link or something like that. Because if form doesn't have this input, this is error. For me at least. It may be treated as solid even if we implement an existing service, but we should understand that web form interface doesn't match interface segregation. Yes. Web form interface, single navigation. To be fully solid, we should split get fields into separated interface and mark it instead of web interface as param types. So I took this interface and split into two different and added third one. Or no, yes, here's the example. Yes, this is new interface, those two, I just split existing in order to create form web interface more solid. And now even if we implement it in existing service, it will be solid. And again, we don't need to solid here as we don't need it. We will reach our target, so need to stick it without reasons. We have particularly solid class and contains input form input. Just to show solid part can be implemented into not solid services and it won't be a violation. Yes, so we can take any existing service, make interface for any logic and just start reusing it. It is why I named that you can rework almost any class. Yes, you just need to find repeatable things and implement method for it, pass from the top interface and add method private, public, yes. For interfaces, they always will be public, yes, and that's how you can replace any existing source code to solid approaches. Yes, and this is just how we handle existing form. Yes, if this form doesn't contain form input, it is throwing the exception and stopping the process. If not, it is handling current DTO, finding for current DTO input response object handler, and handling the functionality. So response handlers may be multiple, yes, and they must be the same amount as inputs. Oh, in my case, yes. Maybe there will be another case where we can do another thing. And finally, all we should do is make new action just to request handle. And we can see results. Also, we can add validation, add encoding XML, as I told it. And all thanks to solid principles where we need, in order to make the project flexible, you may try it yourself. Time for presentation is limited, so I will stop here. Hope it will be useful for you. Our code and presentation is uploaded to my public GitHub account, so feel free to use it. Yes, here is just result. Yes, how look result from the code above, and here I have listed libraries that I was using in presentation, and here you can find examples and try to download it and just try to add forms. Switch forms, maybe implement some additional, let's say, XML, validations or something. No, data structures like XML and validations in case you need. And at the bottom, I just push it what is solid in order to, if someone who sees this lecture, understand what is solid and doesn't have theory. So this is all. Thanks for your attention. I don't know, have we time for the questions, but I will ask, have any even questions or something like that? Yes?
So, for example, when you were creating navigation items, on HTML site, you just use the anchor link, right? One could anticipate, since we are building the website, we might use links in future. Also, right now we don't need them as a separate element, but we could abstract and create anchor link object and then extend it to be the navigation item and further. Are such anticipations of reusability of object is a good practice or anti-pattern in this case?
For example, if we talk about solid, yes, I doubt that I fully understand your question, yes, but I think that I just searching where we have those files. Okay, in this case, if we talk about solid, yes, if we find some bugs or we need to improve some existing solid principles in order to adjust for new logic, we can freely violate, let's say, open-closed principle, yes. If in case we can improve this the whole structure by editing only one object or handler or whatever it is, yes, this is we will need to violate this rule. We cannot say that solid environment any object won't be edited, yes, because if you have, for example, any object, you have bug in it, you can't say to your project manager that solid cannot be edited. Yes. So he will say why you need this solid. So in this case, this is just separating the parts. If you, in solid environment, if you, for example, break one input, other inputs will will be okay, yes? And you will break not all the forms, you will break only those forms which contains this input. All other forms will continue to work as expected. This is one. Second one, is when you are extending, you are editing open-closed classes. You cannot improve anything without breaking what you created before. This is impossible. Yes, you can't build new home on top of another standing home there. Yes, in order to place new home in this place, you need to destruct existing building and create new one with new windows, new flats, yes, and new people living it. Maybe with the people that was living before. But anyway, if you need to restructure the HTML for nav item, you just open nav HTML, edit it, and it is not a violation because in solid is not forbidding fixing the bugs or improving the existing logic in order to adjust for business requirements. Yes, every existing input you can additionally solidify some inputs for input, yes, or something like that. You can create some visible pop-up forms or something like that. You can extend, for example, for example, if we take that, for example, API user, we can create as button and hidden spoiler it, yes. We will display one input here and reuse new input element, and we will add new abstraction level. So in order to add third abstraction level, we will need to involve in second. We can't add third abstraction level without changing second. This is impossible. So any questions? Okay.
If you had, on the one hand, code that is easy to understand, even for beginners, and on the other hand, you have highly maintainable code, which one would win?
For example, if you are talking about code quality, yes, then win will.
I mean, like in your example, the starting point, the simple HTML versus the final result.
I told from in the start of the lecture that you should understand how often you will edit the project, because creating simple project is 1 hour. Yes, creating solid project is 8 hours. So it is 8 times more, because first of all, you will need to create simple project. After you need to analyze this simple project into separated parts. After you need to create interfaces for all separated parts, create abstraction levels, analyze, create, and after you will have good solid code. Yes, in this case, if you think that your project is one-time thing, yes, and your project manager won't come second time and ask you to change something, implement something new or something like that, then you don't need to just do simple code. In favor, if you want to, for example, if my project managers come second time, just adjust your code to solid principles. If it becomes about 20 times for single form, yes, you are changing and you are just trying to your changes are breaking the code forms or something like that, you definitely should use not understandable code for beginners. Yes, because if you take a car can drive any person. If you take a plane, I doubt that any person can say sit in the plane and push the correct buttons in order to fly. Yes, so this case just start from the simple, end with complex. Yes.
I have a question. How big changes solid code well? I understand from you it's basically small changes, but if, for example, manager wanted some radical changes how it codes.
It holds very good because every of components, yes, for example, I told you about spoilering this email input address. You need that one abstraction level in solid environment. So you don't need to refactor all code. Yes. If you can name for on existing example some crucial change that will, let's say, for example.
Let's say we drop emails, we go to the other service, like service.
So we pass existing emails to external services.
Yeah.
Yes, we will need just add one additional handler for this. That's all. Or we can adjust our existing handler interface, yes, and in those input where we have handle function, yes, somehow think to implement there this step to notify other service. For example, we create collection, yes, for passing to the other service with variables. We push to this collection every time this form input is preparing data. We just put it to this collection. After the request, we take this collection and send to external service with. That's all.
And I have one more question. How good do you need documentation to maintain it? Because if you put such complex system, you need some documentation. Or you rely on the code is self-explanatory.
First of all, always you should realize that code is self-explaining. Yes, this is first rule of any developer. But if in case you are working with Solid, yes, and your colleagues are working with Solid, you should understand that they more or less will need to read this code. Yes, they can't come into Solid system and say, hey, I have documentation, I know how it works. In documentation, there is very much problems because sometimes solid component can be edited and member who edited the solid component, he doesn't understand that their documentation existed. He just understands what is solid, how it works. He finds the correct interface, extend it on another interface, add their logic, for example, to submit into external system, after make handler to pass inputs, additionally pass inputs to this handler, and that's all. Yes, and in this case, he don't know that there is documentation, and this documentation will be outdated. So in order, if you create a documentation for such cases, you will need to make sure every employee that is going inside your solid code should read the documentation first. And it is very bad choice because most of developers doesn't read code, and there is even RTFM SIGINT that I won't name it on camera, yes, but it's very commonly used in development because you just need to explain your users, let's say team members, yes, the users that use code, yes, that what is solid, yes, and if they don't understand, you should treat them and explain them, yes. You should give them time to evolve, you should give them time to read, you should give the time to understand. After they will adjust to solid principles, they will start to code much faster. Yes, for example, if you say that this will take about 1 month, yes, for example, what one person can give in 1 month in very complex monolith project without any principles and huge amount of warnings, nothing. Yes, he will just read the warnings and catch an errors. Even if he will implement some feature in 1 sprint, this feature will result as error. Inside solid principles, he will understand how project is structured. And after he will understand how project is structured, he will be responsible for every single element, and he can't break all project. This is like microservices, yes? You can create first abstraction level handler, yeah, break. Then this whole project will be broken, yes. But like like small services, yes, each object have his job. And in case he's breaking only one object, he's breaking only one functionality, and all functionalities that's related on this one object. And this is very common that someone doesn't understand. And then in this case, you can come to the employee and explain, yes, because you see the problem, you understand that he doesn't understand what he is doing, and you just come to him and ask, hey guy, what is wrong? Why you done this? Yes, and he will start to explain. I came here, I doesn't understand anything. This is some kind of 2,000 classes and I don't understand anything. Yes, in this case, you should understand that you need to explain what is solid. Yes, how it uses, how it works. You should show him examples. Yes, in any company there is dev environment. You should invite this junior to you and show, here we can add forms like that. Here we can add forms like that. Here we can add forms like that. Yes, and you will think that you have 20,000 handlers in one object. Yes, and explaining each and every one to him is. Let's say self-killing thing, yes. But in reality, any developer, if he is not dumb, he will understand how Solid works after you will explain 5 handlers. Yes, maybe someone will have 10 handlers, and they will understand how Solid is working and how the structure is, and they will adjust their thinking to the Solid. You doesn't need to make the documentations to explain everything. If you have 20,000 members and you need to explain to everyone, then yes, documentation is best thing. You just write documentation on frequently asked questions and just RTFM to any member that is asking questions. That is good approach. If you have small team, just work with team, work with people, and explain them what is going on instead of trying to write manuals that will never be written.
Thanks. Sorry, if you have questions, you come and ask. We will be here for a while, but it's just quite late, so we kind of have to finish official part. So thank you, Maris, very much.